John, thank you very much for joining us here today as part of Positive Ageing Week 2020. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Hi Suzanne, thank you very much for the opportunity to come in to speak to you today. My name is John Hoctor. I'm from Tipperary Fire and Rescue. I'm Assistant Chief Fire Officer within the service. So Tipperary Fire and Rescue, as you're probably aware, are an organisation to respond on a 24-hour a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to fires, emergencies such as chemical spills, road traffic collisions, water rescues and any other accidents or emergencies that occur. The fire service is a retained fire service, so there's over 120 firefighters based in 12 fire stations across Tipperary, and they actually respond to all those emergencies that I just mentioned. The firefighters are retained. That means they're part-time, but they then would also have another job or run their own business. The firefighters are also first responder trained as emergency first responders or cardiac first responders, so they also can give first aid before the ambulance arrives. That's the operational side of the fire service that probably everybody is familiar with. Okay, I work in fire prevention and building control, and our role within fire prevention and building control is to ensure compliance with the Fire Services Act and the building control legislation. A lot of that work it revolves around buildings, so any new construction of any building, with the exception of private houses or agricultural buildings, must go through design reviews by ourselves for compliance with the building control regulation for fire, and then also the building control regulations for access. That comprises of reviewing drawings plus compliance reports, and if those submissions are adequate, then we issue a fire safety certificate or a disability access certificate. We also then have a very strong programme in terms of the operation of buildings once they're built. So we would do educational programmes with various sectors such as hotels, nursing homes, preschools, in terms of education, and also doing inspection programmes. We have a role in terms of licensing, in terms of licensing courts for nightclubs, for public assembly roles such as bingo or community halls, and we would give evidence in court to the licensing courts on an annualised basis. On top of that, then we deal with inquiries and complaints. But the reason I'm here today is actually around community fire safety strategy.
Would you tell me a little bit more about the community fire safety strategy, please?
Okay,
what is
so
it?
the driver for the community fire safety strategy is that unfortunately every year between 40 and 50 people die in fires in Ireland. And to put that in context, that's every 2 years more people die from fire in Ireland than died in the Grenfell Tower tragedy in the apartment block in London in 2017. So it's a huge number. And unfortunately people don't die in hotels or apartment blocks, they actually die in their own homes. So what we want to do is actually go along and actually make sure people are aware of the real risk to people in their own homes, and then find ways of actually engaging with people to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's why we took up the opportunity to talk to you here today.
Okay, and are there things that we can do to make our homes safer against fire?
Absolutely, right. Kind of the key issue right around the world, not just in Ireland, is the presence of smoke detectors, a minimum of 2 smoke detectors within each house. We've done a lot of research with a professional survey company, and they've actually determined that actually in Tipperary, whilst we're very good in terms of having 1 working smoke alarm, a lot of houses don't have 2 working smoke alarms, which is the recommended minimum. And then people are actually not good at actually testing if the smoke alarm works. They wait till the actual device beeps, whereas the battery is gone, rather than actually testing it on a weekly basis. So that's the key issue that we want to communicate to people.
And do you need to get somebody professional to fit your smoke alarm, or is it something you can just fit yourself?
No, smoke alarms can be fitted yourselves. Now, we also do have a programme for what we would consider vulnerable people who may be actually elderly or infirm. And what we try to do is go out and engage with community groups such as the Carers Association, Community Alert, residents associations. And if they're aware of people that are within their communities that actually are vulnerable, then as a fire service we will go out and provide that service. We'll either provide the smoke alarms and they can self-fit, or one of their families can self-fit, or alternatively we'll actually do a home fire safety visit.
Okay, and I know that you're based in Tipperary, but I presume Kilkenny, Carlow, Waterford, Wexford and the rest of the country as well would have a similar service.
Absolutely. Like the approach I just outlined there is based on a national strategy document called Keeping Communities Safe.
Okay.
And all of the actual fire services right around Ireland would actually try to engage with vulnerable populations in the same way.
Okay. What can we do, I suppose, as well for our older people to encourage them to look after themselves in the home, say with safety? Is there anything that we can do to, I know we said about putting in the fire alarm, but is there anything else that we can do, just little reminders or checks for them before going to bed at night to check on things?
Absolutely right. Kind of, I suppose our request here today would be the first thing to do is actually to go along and think about yourself and people in your community that actually may not have a smoke alarm, and make sure that that actually happens by contacting some of those community groups and getting ourselves involved. For yourself personally, what we would say is get into a routine in terms of actually what we call a nighttime safety check. And we have leaflets we can go out and give out to people. They're available either on the website or they're also available in libraries and in citizen information centres, right? And that's a routine that we would suggest everybody should get into, all right? On top of that, we have a very extensive social media campaign. So we have a Facebook page in Tipperary, and we also have a Twitter account. And we actually run competitions on those social media channels as well. The prizes are a bit predictable in terms of smoke alarms, fire blankets, fire extinguishers, okay. But we've also been lucky enough to receive sponsorship from some local hotels. So there is dinner, bed and breakfast sometimes to be won on the actual the social media accounts.
Okay. One of the things that always drives me up the wall when I'm trying to check the fire alarm in the house is trying to reach the bloom, saying, I either have the sweeping brush or I have a whatever. Is there anything that I can do that would be quicker and easier than...
That's a great question, right? One of the challenges for people as they get older is that actually we don't want people hopping up on stools and chairs to go and test the smoke alarms. Around Ireland, we have been suggesting that you use a sweeping brush as a way of doing it. But we've got a new prop here, right, which is our testing device, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a device for wagging at the actual grandchildren, okay, but actually it allows you to go along and stand under the smoke alarm and to test it, right?
Okay, and it has a little finger on it, so it's going to test it really well.
That's right, yeah. And you can wave it at the grandchildren.
At the grandchildren and use it that way. And you mentioned social media and that as well then. And will people pick up hints and tips there also about safety? Will they be reminded of things for fire safety?
Absolutely. So what we would do is target the social media at a different times of the year. We have a Test It Tuesday campaign, so if you follow us on social media and Facebook, you'll get a reminder every Tuesday to test your smoke alarm rather than relying on a battery to beep. We'd also run campaigns around Halloween, around Christmas, around going back to school, and also then during the summertime period. So we would actually be giving kind of specific tips for people depending on the climate conditions.
Well. How can people contact the fire service if they need them? I'm not saying now for the emergency, but for if they wanted to ask you some questions or some advice on protecting their home against fire, can they contact you?
Absolutely, and just maybe to reassure people, if you see a fire, dial 999 112, okay? But alternatively, if you have a request for advice, then you can contact the council number, which again is on screen behind me, 0761 06 5000. You can contact us on email, which is fireoff@tiperarycoco.ie, and then also then on the social media pages on Twitter and on Facebook.
Okay, and each county as well will have their own email address, which we can pop those up on screen then as well also with it. John, could you just tell me a little bit about the home fire safety visit as well when we're here today?
Okay. So the home fire safety visit is the programme whereby firefighters will actually come to your house. The way it works is that you can't sell for fire. It needs to be through one of the community organisations I mentioned earlier, Residents Association, the Carers Association, or a community alert group. When that form is received by Tipperary Fire Service, we'll make contact with the actual nominated person, okay, and agree a time and a date to go and visit the house. 2 firefighters in uniform will visit the house from your locality. So it'll be if you're in Cloughjordan, you'll be actually visited by firefighters from Cloughjordan Fire Station. They'll be in a fire services vehicle, okay? They'll come to the house to explain what they're going to do in terms of putting in the smoke alarms and doing a home fire safety visit. They'll reconfirm that you're happy to go ahead with it, and then they'll ask you then to stay in the room when they're doing that actual work and doing the home fire safety check. And then on completion of it, okay, they'll leave you one of these for your actual use, and then also some information in terms of kind of the routine for bedtime in terms of being properly fire safe.
And I suppose it's great for people to know that the fire staff come in uniform. They do all the checks, because we were talking another day to the guards, and we were just talking about, you know, bogus visitors. So
Absolutely.
It's great to know that there's a procedure in place there which puts a person's mind at rest.
And it will be pre-announced and pre-agreed, so they won't turn up unannounced. Okay,
that's fabulous.
Anybody who actually arrives at your house will have agreed a time and date before they arrive.
Good, just to put people's mind at rest. So we're tested Tuesday is one of the things we have to remember. Tested once a week.
Correct.
And do our check even at night, have our routine, keep ourselves safe. And if we see a fire when we're passing by somewhere, to call the emergency services.
Absolutely.
Straight away. John, thank you so much for sharing your experience and talking to us here today as part of Positive Ageing Week 2020. I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome.